So good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming to hear our talk. In the interest of keeping to our timeline, we're gonna read from a script, but I hope you find it conversational and interesting nevertheless. So this presentation actually follows up on our report last year's SSOU on our international research project examining the language learning and social integration experiences of adult migrants. As we observed then, the intensity of contemporary global migration is reshaping geolinguistic contours internationally and impacting societies within national borders, with language both opening paths and creating barriers to integration in a host society. The three host societies in this study, the Greater Toronto Area in Ontario, Canada, Erie County in Pennsylvania in the United States, and the province of Agrigento in Sicily, Italy, are focal points along international migration routes and characterized by an influx of newcomers. Those of us who live in the GTA in Southern Ontario know this firsthand. Our presentation today is an overview. We'll present an overview of the project conceptually and methodologically, and we'll extrapolate from three core findings related to migrants' self-reported translanguaging practices. I must say it's a rather ambitious 15-minute presentation, so we had to edit it down a bit. Hopefully it'll still be intelligible. Methodologically, our study is migrant-centric. This is a term we're borrowing from the International Organization for Migration, and provides insights into, we have technical difficulties.
Yeah, the people online can't see the slides, so. Let's just leave it not in
Now it's good.
presentation. Is it good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that good? Our study is migrant-centric and provides insights into the first-person perspective of migrants on their language learning needs and experiences in a home country, in a country of transit, in a destination country. The focus is informed by our hybrid theoretical framework linking translanguaging and transnationalism. For its part, translanguaging adopts what we consider to be a radically emic or insider perspective on language use, in which speakers draw on the breadth of their linguistic resources, when they can, without recourse to externally defined distinctions between formally defined language. And for its part, transnationalism challenges portrayals of migration as a unidirectional and permanent move, that is, a voyage of no return, what in Italy they call un viaggio di non ritorno. The project draws on 76 surveys and 18 follow-up interviews with adult.
It won't advance now. It's frozen.
Yeah, no, I'll pause again. It's nice to have the visual.
Let's just keep it not in presentation mode. What do you think?
That works. Next slide, we want. The project draws on, as I was saying, 76 surveys and 18 follow-up interviews with adult migrant language learners collected online in 2021. Considering the pandemic, we recruited participants through informal invitations and personal networks, notwithstanding the fact that we had promised otherwise in our SSHRC grant, but the pandemic came on and we had to change gears. In North America, this resulted in migrant participants enrolled in adult English language classes that had moved online during the pandemic, while in Italy, this resulted in migrant participants known to a freelance educational researcher, one of our RAs, in fact. The participants in each research site are from basically all around the world: Latin America and the Caribbean, identifying Spanish as their first or dominant language; Asia, identifying Urdu, Bengali, Gujarati, Dari, Nepali, Thai, Bui, Vietnamese, and Tamil; Africa, identifying Somali, Amharic, Tigrinya, Esa, Nuer, Swahili, Kimbembe, French, and Arabic, and with participants from Mali and Senegal identifying other regional languages; Central and Eastern Europe, identifying Hungarian, Turkish, Belarusian, Romanian, and Russian, and the Middle East, identifying Arabic. Our talk today presents and discusses, in turn, three insights from the project, namely migrant interactions with speakers of their first language, the impact of classroom instruction, and how migrants manage the dynamic between home and host languages. And Gabrielle, you're going to take it from here.
Yeah. So for the first insight, while migrants report interacting with others who speak their first language is very important, They also report avoiding contact with this group. The data indicate that 85% of such interactions occur at home. So in fact, 40% of the migrants feel interactions with such individuals remind them of home, and 21% believe such speakers have similar experiences and needs to themselves. Participants say their host country feels like home because family members are present, and they will never lose their mother tongue because they use it at home every day. As Irina, a married mother of two from the Russian Federation, who now lives in Italy, puts it, because yes, when you arrive in town and knowing host language is very important, but when you have loved ones around you who always support you, you already begin to feel at home. Manka, a married mother of four children who was born in Somalia and now lives in Canada, reiterates this sentiment. Where I live, it feels like home because I live with my family, like my kids, my husband. It's home because it's free of judgment, free of discrimination. It's surrounded by love, so it's home. However, migrants also report that interactions with people who share their home language are less helpful for integrating into the host society, with 16% reporting them specifically as not helpful. They feel learning the host language can be hindered at home and in their L1 communities. Chris from the Democratic Republic of Congo and Tanzania, who now lives in the United States, offers this analysis. When we meet our local people, we don't have ability because we will start to speak the local language longer, and it takes some time to improve. We have to meet another person from different communities that will help us to improve. He adds, looking at my local people, yeah, we take time to practice together, and we decide in that today we will only speak English. For her part, Wenis, who was born in El Salvador and now is settled in Canada, she laments a lost chance. Here, I don't have the opportunity to interact with others, apart from my family, so I can't really put in practice my English skills, just in class or sometimes but rarely with my brothers. This cross-current between valuing interactions with L1 speakers and avoiding contact with them represents two diverging priorities, namely feeling at home and integrating into the host country. Viewing the migrants' language use choices as the deployment of communicative resources to meet their everyday needs can help us make sense of these diverging priorities. These everyday needs may include maintaining connections to a life preceding migration and transitioning into a life post-migration. How migrants draw on their communicative resources is shaped by pragmatic, mundane, everyday needs, an example of translanguaging as, to quote here, spontaneous, impromptu, and momentary actions and performances of the individual, according to Lee in 2011. In our project, we've come to see translanguaging less as an advocacy tool for linguistic diversity and more as a tool to make sense of how migrants live their lives in linguistically diverse host societies. In this view, translanguaging and social integration is better understood fluidly relative to function rather than form.
So for our second insight, the project found that migrants overall value classroom language learning in North America, where they have access to classes, and in Italy, where classes are less accessible. In highlighting the advantages of classroom language learning, Anna says she does not have many people to speak English to outside of her language class in the United States, and she shares this. The conversation part is most inside the class because we can speak together, yeah, and everybody is trying to speak. Also, seeing other people who are learning like me also encourages me. Migrants in North America characterize classrooms as a comfort zone for extended host country language use. Outside of the classroom, however, Wenis observes they are different because inside the classroom, I could talk with the teacher or my classmates, but outside is only if I'm going to buy something. I can say something in English, but not a real conversation. Monka adds, inside the classroom, you can express yourself and your teacher will correct you, will show you. When you're outside, the teacher's not there. Rosemary, a 37-year-old married mother of three, originally from Nigeria and living in Canada since 2018, gestures to self-image across contexts. Inside the classroom, the language experiences is nice, perfect, but outside, I just speak as if I'm still from Nigeria with them. Notwithstanding, other interview data indicate language learning in the classroom can be useful in everyday life. Rene, a father of one child, originally from Colombia and living in Canada since 2019, observes, "In my job, many persons use other words, but I need no many more words. The class is perfect." In contrast, in Italy, language classes are not as common in our data set. Talisa, a married mother of one child who emigrated from Romania in 2004, relates, "Because in the town where we are, there aren't all these possibilities. No one directed me, and being a foreigner, I didn't even know. Therefore, I didn't even have the chance." The migrants in Italy are less pleased with their current language learning. Provocatively, however, while migrants in North America are anxious that their host language use will be judged, migrants in Italy largely report not feeling judged when speaking with locals outside of the classroom. It's not clear whether this latter pattern is linked to other mitigating demographic, social, or cultural factors. However, it highlights a provocative pattern in the data. Despite migrants across all three sites expressing a positive view of classroom language learning, those, primarily in North America, who attend classes experience anxiety, while those who do not attend classes, primarily in Italy, largely do not. One possibility is that classrooms induce anxiety and can disincentivize migrants from translanguaging, perhaps for fear of revealing their limited capacity in the host language. The literature is replete with studies addressing the affective dimensions of adult second language classes, the prevalence of anxiety, and strategies for responding to it. Drawing attention to this pattern in our data raises the possibility that although classrooms appeal to migrant language learners, they are not always the ideal venue for learning the host language. For instance, the workplace, as reported in an Italian study by Bianco and Ortiz Cobo, in 2019, may hold promise as a viable and less anxiety-inducing alternative.
So finally, concerning how participants report managing the dynamic between home and host languages, nearly 90% of the migrants believe they will continue to translanguage often or sometimes. Notably, migrants say they're more likely to do so after achieving higher host language capacity. For instance, consider Wenes, who demonstrates a higher facility in English than her counterpart Moni, who was born in Pakistan and lived in India, the United Arab Emirates, and the United States before settling in Canada in 2018. Even though Wenes shares some discomfort in using Spanish and English, she indicates that tapping into both enables language learning. For me, it's easier just to be speaking in Spanish because it's my first language, but I use both because I think it would help me. And they can correct me if I'm saying something wrong. So that's why I'm trying to use both. In contrast, Moni expresses discomfort in using Urdu and English, in this case because her attempts to speak English are interrupted by another Urdu speaker, presumably because they feel her English is inadequate. Last 2 months ago, I go for dentist clinic. They are the Indian doctor. When I start the English with them, she says, "No, Moni." Moni continues in Urdu. So they speak Urdu some words. She thinks maybe I can't understand English. I discomfortable. This situation is further complicated in Italy, where minority languages are inserted into pre-existing dialectical competition between Italian and Sicilian, which can invoke differing migrant attitudes. Firstly, Talisa explains, "So I have 2 sisters who are also here in town where I live, but we often speak Sicilian with them. Maybe we start speaking in Romanian, then from one second to the next, we find ourselves speaking Sicilian, because it often happens there that we no longer find the words in Romanian. So we also have this difficulty." In contrast, Irina is less interested in Sicilian and offers this disclaimer. No. And I honestly don't want to offend Sicilians for any reason. I prefer to speak Italian. This choice of mine in the beginning is nothing personal. I prefer to speak, if there is in the future, I will have the possibility, clean Italian, but not Sicilian. So these findings indicate that how participants report managing the dynamic between home and host languages is not uniform across migrants. Any number of factors can impact their choices to live in multiple languages, including proficiency, preferences, and context. For those demonstrating a willingness to translanguage, the data suggest they are more likely to do so after achieving higher capacity and comfort in the host language. Movement toward the host country language thus holds promise as facilitative and expansive for their linguistic repertoires. However, as to Lisa, the languages migrants bring to a host country can also be pulled into attrition and signal subtractive multilingualism. How this takes shape can vary according to proficiency, preferences, and context. For instance, while Irina shares a similar set of migration experiences with Talisa, her preference is to move toward Italian rather than Talisa's preference for Sicilian. This is a further instance of the complex dynamic around how participants report managing their home and host languages. The contemporary reality of multi-directional, transient transnational spaces and diverse variable translingual practices may introduce even greater variability into the dynamic between home and host languages, making it even less generalizable and predictable.
These then are 3 insights from the project. We leave you with these photos of the 3 research sites and look forward to your questions, observations.